hazardous waste, toxic chemicals, heat stress. At hundreds of work sites around the country, workers are exposed to these hazards every day, hazards which can cause injury and death. But occupational illness can be avoided if you learn how to protect yourself.
Safety is everybody's part. You know, everybody's got to take a part in safety. That's the only way it's got to be done. I mean, you can't. If I'm on a job and the staging's bad, and I just up and go home at the end of the day without telling the next guy about it, he might be the one that falls down. So it's everybody's job to do their own thing as far as safety goes.
If you've worked on a construction site, then you're familiar with many common hazards like cave-ins or bad staging. But hazardous waste dumps present new, often invisible, dangers. And although every waste site is different, there are a few basic preventive measures which should always be taken. First, use engineering controls. These controls include material handling equipment, like a drum grappler attached to a backhoe, which reduces the contact between workers and contaminated drums. Next, employ safe work practices, like the buddy system. Working with a buddy means looking out for your partner's safety, as well as your own. And finally, in addition to your standard hard hat, wear the required personal protective clothing and equipment in all hazardous situations.
I've worked at a lot of hazardous waste sites, and safety is the most important thing. Wearing your mask or the rubber suit and gloves, it's up to you whether you're going to live or die doing this work.
One of the greatest dangers hazardous waste workers face is exposure to toxic chemicals. Chemicals can affect your body in a number of ways, from minor irritations to life-threatening diseases. Generally, the seriousness of the disease depends on the dose you receive. Dose means two things: the amount, or concentration, of the chemical that the worker is exposed to, and the length of time of exposure. Chemicals are found as solids, liquids, or gases, all of which can be harmful. In a solid state, a chemical is most dangerous as a dust or fume, because the particles are small enough to be inhaled. In a liquid state, mists, which consist of tiny droplets suspended in the air, are particularly hazardous. Vapors result from chemicals that are in a gaseous state and can also harm you. Some chemicals may not be dangerous in one form, yet are highly hazardous in another. For example, in a solid form, asbestos cannot hurt you, but if the fibers become airborne, it is deadly. If you accidentally touch or are splashed by a chemical, you may experience something called a local effect. A local effect occurs when your body is harmed at the point where the chemical touched it. A skin rash is one example of a local effect. Chemicals can also enter your body. There are three ways this can happen: absorption through the skin, inhalation into the lungs, and ingestion through the stomach. When a chemical enters your body, it may eventually cause cancer or other diseases. This is referred to as a systemic effect. In other words, if a chemical gets into your system, it could result in a serious illness. Solvents, for example, can be either inhaled, ingested, or absorbed, and cause damage to your liver. Cancer is one example of a chronic disease. Other chronic illnesses include lung, kidney, and liver disease and damage to the central nervous system. Not everyone who comes in direct contact with hazardous chemicals will develop these problems, but the relationship between exposure to significant doses of toxic chemicals and chronic illness is very high. It is difficult to prove, however, that chronic diseases are caused by chemical exposure. There may be a time lapse as long as 20 to 30 years between exposure and the first symptoms of the disease. Acute illnesses like eye irritations and skin rashes may not seem as serious as chronic diseases, but often they are the body's first warning that its defense system is breaking down. Further complications could follow if these problems are not immediately taken care of. Although this medical information is helpful, it's most important to apply it on the job. For instance, at a hazardous waste site, it's often difficult to determine what chemicals are present. For this reason, it's important that workers always protect themselves from exposure. by wearing the appropriate protective suit and respirator. There are 3 levels of protective gear other than your regular work uniform. These are referred to as Level A, Level B, and Level C. What level you wear is determined by the particular or potential hazards at the site.
Wearing the right protective suit is so important because it's been chosen for the job you're trying to get done. And wearing the right suit, you know, I think you're probably safer in that than you are in your own home. They make these suits for a reason, and I'll tell you, I feel really safe out there when I'm in one.
Engineering controls are another important form of prevention. Enclosed spaces should be ventilated to prevent the buildup of fumes and dust. Hazardous areas should be barricaded so that workers don't walk through toxic areas unprotected. Monitoring devices should be used by trained personnel to determine the level of hazardous vapors or fumes at the site. Workers can protect themselves even further by cutting down on any harmful personal habits, like cigarette smoking and alcohol abuse. For example, cigarette smoke, combined with exposure to asbestos, can greatly increase your risk of lung cancer. Another serious hazard that workers face is heat stress. Hot, humid environments and demanding physical labor can all contribute to heat stress. Because of their protective clothing, hazardous waste workers are at greater risk than laborers working in other areas of construction. Workers who are not physically fit or who are dehydrated from medication or sickness are particularly prone to heat stress and should avoid working in hot or humid environments. Heat stress shouldn't be confused with simply feeling hot or tired. It's a serious illness that employers and workers must take extraordinary measures to prevent.
Normally you can't, when it's 95 and 95 degrees humidity, normally you're going to slow down a little bit, and it's expected, especially if you're working outside on the job site. I tell them, hey, every hour, every half hour, go in, get some water, sit down, relax. But water is probably the best thing you can do. Drink a lot of water, keep that fluid in you. Because once you stop sweating, you're in deep trouble, right? Okay.
The early warning signs of heat stress include drowsiness, cramps, and rashes. Advanced stages can cause nausea, dizziness, and confusion. Heat stroke, the most advanced state of heat stress, can impair the brain and cause convulsions, coma, and death. Once you stop sweating, you're in real danger of heat stroke.
Being in a suit that I've been in is like being in a steam bath for 10 hours when you're only working 4 hours in a rubber suit. Protective suits, when you wear them, they're very hot. There's no shade. You have to replace your body fluids. When you're not thirsty, you still have to drink plenty of fluids.
Heat stress can be prevented. If you're working in a hot environment, take frequent breaks and keep track of your temperature and pulse. Drink plenty of fluids and get to shaded areas as soon as you've gone through the decontamination process. Should any of the symptoms of heat stress occur, stop what you're doing and seek help. One of the best things you can do to protect your health is to use your occupational health clinic. Because these clinics are designed to diagnose work-related problems, they are often better equipped to take care of a worker's health than most personal physicians. Workers can use their occupational health clinics for regular checkups and for treatment of any work-related injuries. Your employer might decide to send you to an occupational health clinic, since they are legally required to pay for a physical exam before you start work at a hazardous waste site.
As an occupational health physician, I'm specifically trained to recognize diseases that are related to work and to approach them and prevent them. I'm afraid to say that most physicians are not knowledgeable about occupational health. It's not to their discredit. Physicians generally do not learn about occupational health in medical school.
And if you need copies of your x-rays, you can get them later.
Regular medical monitoring includes a thorough physical exam, lab tests, breathing tests, chest x-rays, and a detailed medical history. These procedures can sometimes detect the early stages of a serious illness and increase your chances of being cured. But medical monitoring cannot prevent diseases like cancer. The only way to prevent chronic illness is to protect yourself from exposure at the workplace. Many workers worry that they could lose their job by taking certain health precautions. If you're not given the right protective gear, for example, what should you do?
If I was in a position where my health was in danger, I would first go to my site safety officer. And I would talk with him about the situation. If he couldn't help me, I would go one step up to my product manager and talk to him about it. And at last resort would have to be my union representative. If all three failed, my last resort would be OSHA.
OSHA will keep your complaint confidential at your request. In addition to the protection guaranteed by OSHA, you may also be protected by a collective bargaining agreement. You should therefore notify your business agent or job steward of your concerns. These are the procedures to follow under normal circumstances. If you believe you are in immediate danger, however, go right to your supervisor or site safety and health officer and ask for a different assignment. You may even have the right to refuse a specific task if it poses an imminent threat to your safety. By and large, most employers are concerned for their workers. But remember that you have the ultimate responsibility for your own safety.
You should be responsible for your own safety. I mean, there's only so many things a contractor can do. You're going to run into the problems out there that somebody sitting in an office has no knowledge of, and you know what's safe if you've got any training or experience at all. And if you don't, find out.
Working at hazardous waste sites can be dangerous, but you can protect yourself if you make prevention a priority. Find out about the hazards you work with. Be sure your personal habits don't increase the risks you face. Wear the right protective gear. Watch out for your buddy. And make sure your work site is outfitted with engineering controls that ensure your safety. A safe work environment goes a long way toward guaranteeing your health. And your health is worth fighting for.